in your opinion, do people rise faster when you move from company A to B to C to D and all, or do you stay in one company and then grow your career gradually?
For me, I'm happy to sit down with something and just focus on it and be the best at it. And there are genuinely people who are very they can't stay with one thing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's important to understand yourself. It's important to understand your strengths.
Yeah.
And ask yourself, what exactly are you, if it's just money you're looking for, I think whatever impact you're going to get is going to be limited. So you should ask yourself, what's the purpose from jumping from one place to another? It has to be beyond money. It has to be, more about, what exactly you want to become as an individual, where you want to grow to, what impact you think you want to have. So in reality, it can happen both ways, but I think you just have to be very careful to ensure that you are not just pursuing something flashy and something green, because by the time you get into, they say the grass is always green at the other side. Many times by the time you get there, you realize that, it was really just shiny from the outside. It's not all that glitters is gold. If you are making moves, it needs to be calculated. It must align with your medium-term goal, your long-term goal, and ensure that ultimately this is where I want to get to, as opposed to just jumping around for titles and for pay increase and the like.
My name is Aurelua Adekoya, and I'm your host for Tikkytalks. What is Tikkytalks, you might say? Tikkytalks is your career and business podcast where you learn about how to grow and how to navigate on your career and business journey. Did you just finish school? Are you 0 to 5 years out of school? There's definitely one or two things that you can learn on Tikkytalks. So make sure you follow us on YouTube and IG. Tikkytalks is TIKKYTALKS. Tikkytalks. Ensure you're following us and catch up on all the other previous episodes that we have on YouTube and on Instagram. See ya. So welcome to today's episode of Tikkytalks. And today I have with me my amazing big sis. If you hear a title, you know that myself I'm something. We come from a family of some things. So let me officially introduce my sister. Oyinda Akinyemi is an executive director in Stanbic IBTC Capital. I know big people. This has nothing to my shoulder, but I just know big people. So you're welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me
Thank you
today.
For coming. So my sister has such an amazing story, right, that we're going to hear today. She started, okay, maybe you should tell us a bit of your career journey, right? What did you study in school, and then, how did you rise the career ladder, and then, now ED, big things.
All right. I read accounting in Oba and One University, OAU.
They are very proud. Very proud people.
They have to be proud. Yeah, so I read accounting. I had always known, for a while that I was going to be in the finance world. In fact, it was our daddy.
Hello, Daddy.
That introduced me to the finance world and, exposed me earlier on to, some of his big friends that were doing big things. And so
but wait, though, it's missing that my daddy is a doctor, and it's missing that daddy introduced. He did not introduce me to the money.
While I was in secondary school,
so,
anytime I would come on holidays from school, he would send me. He had friends that were working in banks.
Really?
Yeah, he would send me to, his friends in the banks. He had shares, so he would send me to go after his shares. In different companies, so I had an opportunity to. I'm sorry.
My daddy was giving me his medical books, those fat books. He would say, "All right, go and read." I said, "Daddy, I'm not interested. Medicine is not my calling." He said, "No, that read it. You'll be interested." He wanted me to be, and unfortunately, there's no doctor in our family.
Sadly.
And as the last born, maybe I was his last hope. And he tried. My daddy tried, but sorry, Daddy. Well, so yeah,
so I think from early on, I had that picture of, I wanted to be somebody big, doing big things. And so I decided I was going to read accounting from, much earlier in secondary school. And so I got into university to read accounting. And so once I finished, as an accounting graduate, I graduated with first class honors. And so as an accounting graduate, of course I had options. I applied to a number of the Big 4 audit firms, and I got accepted to Arthur Andersen, now KPMG.
Yeah.
You know, and so I served there. I did my NYC there, and I was retained. And of course, it was an extremely, excellent environment. Very good opportunity to learn, to build a solid foundation. I started out in audit, and I decided very quickly that audit was too boring, and so I moved on to the consulting side of the business, where I was working with companies and the like. Now, something interesting happened along the way. I stayed at Arthur Andersen for just 18 months. So I mean, at the time, we were posted to an assignment in Port Harcourt. We were doing a job for Shell, and those assignments were, they would take months and all. And even before then, I loved the job, I loved the exposure, but I realized that the job was becoming an idol, so to say. And it was affecting my work with God, it was affecting my relationship with God, it was affecting my commitment in church. I was in the prayer department, and I was hardly ever able to make, the meetings. And so while I was in Port Harcourt, I had a lot of time. Of course, I was there for several weeks, away from home, away from everything. I had a lot of time to think and to reflect. And I decided to take a very rash decision. I decided to resign my job.
Sorry.
Now, I don't know if you remember.
Of course, we all thought she was not okay. I was a little girl that time, but how can you be working in Arthur Andersen and then you resign? I still remember when she came home, everybody was talking about it, and I'm like, maybe something has happened, though. Maybe our village people. I remember. We all thought that, no, there's something wrong. But
yeah, I mean, it was a very rash decision. I decided that, okay, I'm going to resign. And again, there was, of course, several thoughts came to my mind. It was something that was easier to do early on in my career. I was just 18 months into my career. I know then I was speaking with my boss then, and he, of course, he could not understand it. And he looked me eye to eye and said, I know when people are making a mistake, and I'm sure you're making a mistake.
So what was the reason you gave your boss for resigning?
I can't remember. Because, there was no reason that would make sense to anybody, because I can't even remember what I told my parents,
I just know that we thought that something has gone wrong.
And so I just decided that, okay, I would rather have my life go in a different trajectory. So I went home, Now, before I left Port Harcourt, I bumped into a gentleman. I didn't know him from Adam, but he bumped into me and said, "Oh, I know you. You were in OAU." So he said he recognized my face from OAU. So I had put in my resignation letter then. So he asked me what I was doing. I told him my story. I was working with Andersen, but I just put in my resignation letter, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So he said, "Okay, I have this uncle that works in investment banking and trust company. When you get to Lagos, go and have a chat with him and see if there's, an opening he has for you." And prior to then, I had told myself that I would never work in a bank. I mean, while I was in Andersen, I told myself I would never work in a bank. And of course, because the kind of, experiences that many people that worked in banks had at that time. But interestingly, I had heard of this investment banking and trust company that it was a different kind of organization. It was a small bank, they paid them top money, you needed to be, up there before you can get into the institution. And so I decided that, it was worth a try. And so by the time I got back to Lagos, I went to meet him, his uncle, and then gave him my resume. He looked at it and said, "Oh, okay, sorry, at this time we don't actually hire people who don't have either a professional qualification, a master's degree, and the like." And he said, "You can, go and pursue your professional exams and maybe come back." Of course, I took that as a challenge. Now, as an accounting graduate, I had 2 stages to write for my professional exams. Okay. And so this happened in December 1998. Gosh.
Some of you watching this
sorry, 1999, December 1999.
Okay.
Yeah. So I used the year 2000 to write my exams, the May and the November diet.
So when you were home between the Arthur Andersen and before you got another job, you were writing?
So I was writing the exams, and I got a filler job in a very small organization. So at least I was
earning
huge pay
something.
cuts.
I can
but,
imagine.
But at least, my focus was on my professional exams.
Okay.
So I did that job for a couple of months. And so when the results came out, thankfully I passed both stages at one sitting. So I went back to investment banking and trust company, went through the interview process, and I got hired.
Wow. Okay, and then you've been at, it's no more investment banking and trust, so it's now Stanbic IBTC,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And then so you started at entry level, right? And then now ED in just a few years. So how has that journey been? What would you say has been instrumental to your growth? Because I see a lot of people get stuck, especially when they get to manager, middle manager role, and then, moving up that ladder can be a bit difficult. So what were the key things for you that were instrumental in your growth?
So several things. Now, for me, when I find something that works, I stick with it. Now, honestly, when I started that job, I never expected that I would stay there beyond 10 years, But the organization itself was, is, an organization that is perfectly aligned, with my values. I said before that I never wanted to work in a bank, but this was a different kind of bank. This was a bank where, the individuals, they walked the talk. You actually had, leaders that were exemplary and, doing great things, So I had a direct boss, my first boss. In fact, all through my career, she's the longest person that I've worked with. And I learned a whole lot from her. And I saw someone in her that was very balanced. I mean, professionally, she was on top of her game. In her personal life, she was a family person that was very committed, to her children. And so, I always had someone that was ahead of me that, was always giving me a picture of, what could be done. And, in many instances, I mean, she fought for me to ensure that, I could thrive, I could, discover myself. She gave me many opportunities, to grow. And so, all through the period I've been there, I've always just learned to strive for, something bigger, to strive for something better. Now, one will say, and more or less, I've been in the same part of the business for all these years. And again, like I said, if I find something that works that I enjoy, I'm happy to stick with it for as long, as it takes. I've had opportunities to maybe, pivot to other parts of the organization and all, but I just realized that, okay, investment banking, I enjoy it. I have an opportunity to grow, and then, the organization that I joined, is not the organization that it is today. So you could as well say that I've worked for 3 different organizations.
So it has evolved.
Exactly, because investment banking and trust company then became IBTC Chartered Bank, when we went through a merger with a commercial bank, and then ultimately the merger with Stanbic Bank and Standard Bank, which then sort of gave me a lot of exposure, because once upon a time I was working for a domestic bank, but now I'm working for an international bank. And my role also has expanded over the years, so I have responsibility for not just Nigeria, but for other African markets. And so, there's always, something more to do. There's always something more to aspire. There's always something more to reach out to. And I think that has just kept me going, coupled with the fact that, I've been fortunate to have been in a very supportive environment with, the people that I've had around me.
Interesting. So, there's this thing going on that people are saying that, if you want to rise up the career ladder fast, you need to change companies. And I know people that have been changing companies and yet they are still at maybe manager level or something. So what's your take on that? Is it in your opinion, do people rise faster when you move from company A to B to C to D and all, or do you stay in one company and then grow your career gradually?
I think both ways can work. And so, because and there are people, like I said, for me, I'm happy to sit down with something and just focus on it and, be the best at it. And there are genuinely people who are very, they can't stay with one thing. But at the same time, it's important to understand yourself. It's important to understand your strengths. And ask yourself, what exactly are you, if it's just money you're looking for, I think whatever impact you're going to get is going to be limited. So you should ask yourself, what's the purpose from jumping from one place to another? It has to be beyond money. It has to be, more about, what exactly you want to become as an individual, where you want to grow to, what impact you think you want to have. So in reality, it can happen both ways, but I think you just have to be very careful to ensure that you are not just pursuing something flashy and something green, because by the time you get into, they say the grass is always green at the other side. Many times by the time you get there, you realize that, it was really just shiny from the outside. It's not not all that glitters is gold. As it were. So you need to be intentional and deliberate. If you are making moves, it needs to be calculated. It must align with your medium-term goal, your long-term goal, and ensure that ultimately this is where I want to get to, as opposed to just jumping around for titles and for pay increase and the like.
Yeah, I love what you said about knowing yourself. Because we are not all the same. We are wired differently. So because somebody's path took them, towards the right direction, doesn't mean that, that's the best way, and then you also have to necessarily go in that direction. So it's important to know yourself, understand yourself. What is your goal? She talked about medium-term goals, long-term goals. If you're going to move, does it align with those goals, or would you be better off or closer to your goals staying where you currently are? I know. But I'd like you to touch on, are there times when you felt discouraged, or maybe when you had maybe a difficult boss or a promotion that you expected that didn't come at that time, and how did you handle those situations?
Yeah, definitely. I believe, in one's journey, there will always be times of discouragement and when you question, okay, is this where I'm supposed to be? Yeah. So I remember there was a time that I felt a bit frustrated because I couldn't give enough time to my family, as I would love to. And I know at that time, I thought the answer for me was to resign. I thought, okay, maybe I've done my time here. I've spent, because I can't remember how many years I had spent, but I had, done quite, a number of years. But I decided to talk because, if I'm going to make any decision like that, because I had, reliable people around me, people that I knew had, my good at heart, So I talked to a few people. So I talked to one of my bosses. And the question he asked me again was, okay, so, what next am I going to do? And don't tell me that you are Abraham, that you're going, And then my immediate boss also, I spoke with her. And I realized that the answer was not, resigning, because again, it was a thought in my mind, not that I had made up my mind per se. But then I realized that, she was able to work things for me such that I had more flexibility, for that period. So for over the next couple of months, or for quite a while, I had some flexibility with my work pattern and the like, and I really, really, appreciated that. There was another time when I actually thought I wasn't, but I wasn't moving, progressing as I would have really loved to. And so I had a conversation with an external mentor that I had, and he asked me, okay, what do I do on the job? Okay, what exactly have I delivered? Because I felt that now, for someone like me, I could be a perfectionist, and so so if I feel I don't, hit that mark, it definitely affects me in, even in the way, I project myself. And so I had a conversation with him, and he asked a lot of questions, and then he realized that, okay, you've actually gotten results here. You've gotten results here, even though this did not pan out, the way you wanted, but you've made progress here and there. So why don't you project, those areas where you have had results, and the ones that did not turn out the way you expected. You sort of take stock of what you need to work on. Yeah. And so, when I was having, the next sort of review with my manager, I took a different perspective. The things that, at least areas that I knew that worked well, I projected those areas. Yeah. And it was amazing. It was very well received. My boss was very well pleased, and let's just say, it took a turn. My review took a turn. The results took a turn, and I just realized that, okay, so how much have I been hiding all these years, and not just, speaking and projecting myself and, what I have achieved. You don't have to be 100%, in that sense, but the things that you have done, allow it to speak for you. So I'm so thankful that, I was able to give myself a voice. And it just changed the dynamics for me.
Wow. So many amazing things in just these short sentences that you have mentioned. One is having mentors, having leaders, good people that can tell you the truth, and advise you, okay, do something like this or like this, right? One thing that is also very important, when you talked about when you felt you didn't have enough time for your family, I bet if you were not doing some good things, they wouldn't have given you that flexibility. Because someone who is not performing, come on, why should I give this person further flexibility? But not only that you are doing good things, but you are also projecting yourself and the good. Sometimes we beat ourselves up of, oh, there's this that I've not achieved, right? But then what have you achieved? There was a year that for my performance appraisal, I didn't get such a good score. And I was surprised, I went back to my boss and everything, and I said, what's happening? And eventually it was changed, but I learned something. I learned that I should always document, the things that I had done. I started documenting. So Q1, I will write, oh, I did this, I helped the company do this, oh, we grew from this to this because of my influence and all that. And so when I go into performance appraisal, it's not just my boss telling me you did. I said, this is what, in case you have forgotten, this is what I did, this is what I did. So, a lot of people would say, let your work speak for you. But you have mouth. Sometimes you have to speak for yourself. I'm saying you have to do both, right? Of course, do good work. And there are also people that are just cha and talking and they don't have good work, right? So let your work speak for you. But then you also need to speak for yourself where it's necessary. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a pleasure having my sister.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you today, and I'm sure you have learned a thing or two. You can go back, listen to it, and then pick up. There might be some things that you missed out, but definitely a lot of tidbits that you can get that can help you grow along in your career journey. Until we see you again, please follow us on YouTube, Tikkytalks, and IG and Tikkytalks. It's Oroluwa signing out. Bye.